gardeners. So today I am here to talk about ball pythons. So this is my ball python right here. This is Chaos. He is a coral glow ball python and he's gorgeous. So today I'm just going to dive right into the care and the behavior and everything that you should know about ball pythons before getting one, especially if you're a beginner. As most of you know, I was definitely not the biggest fan of ball pythons in the past, and that is because I mainly just had a lot of bad experience with them because they are very timid snakes. They're very, very shy. That's why they're called ball pythons, because they like to just ball up and be away from people, and they're just very shy. However, as babies, they are very defensive as well, and they will also ball up as well as come out and snap at you, which has happened to me many times because I don't know what it is with ball pythons, but they just have it out for me, except for this little guy right here because he is a total sweetheart and he is just like the perfect ball python, and he has kind of changed my mind about ball pythons. So diving into the care for ball pythons is generally very easy in my opinion, just because they do not require that much. That's just my opinion though. But basically when it comes to caring for these guys, they are small as babies. This is actually, well, he's probably like about 3 months old now, so he's still very tiny. But they are thicker snakes. These pythons get very large in girth as they get larger. So in time, you're looking for an adult to be about like 4 to maybe 6 feet long. The females are generally larger than the males, so that's something to keep in mind. But because they are so thick and they do get very long, they can be a pretty decent sized snake by the time that they're full grown. So that's something to keep in mind before getting one of these guys. That being said, you would think that a snake that gets that large would require a huge amount of space. However, with ball pythons, they actually are known to just hide away, and they love to be in small, tight places. So that's basically what they're doing in the wild, and that's what they're going to do in captivity as well. And because of that, these snakes are so great for racking systems. However, that is not my preference, so you can also keep them in a tank. It's totally up to you. But I think that no matter what size snake you have, even if they do like to just hide all of the time, you should provide them enough space to be able to move around and exercise. So for Chaos's enclosure, he's actually in a plastic tub right now, and in time he will be upgraded, but again, he's still very small and he has a ton of space in there for now, so that's working out great for him. But it's up to you. You can use a plastic container, a racking system, or a tank for these guys. Just make sure that depending on the size of your snake, they have enough room to move around, as well as have a cool and a warm hide in their enclosure. So when it comes to the heating for these snakes, I would recommend using a heating pad. And for the heating pad, you want the hot spot to reach 88 to 92 degrees for these guys. And the best way to do that is to use a heating pad as well as a thermostat in order to regulate the temperature to make sure that it doesn't get too hot for them either. I place my heating mat underneath the container, or you can do that with the tank or whatever you may be using. You can also use heat tape. I'll do the job and it works out great for them. Something to keep in mind is that snakes do not need any UVB. As I mentioned earlier, they're going to be hiding most of the day, so they aren't going to be out basking or anything such as like a lizard. So they are not going to be needing any UVB, and I also would not recommend using a basking heating source from above for a ball python, just because, as I mentioned, they're always hiding. So they're going to want to be hiding away, and they still need to get that heat. So the best way to do it is through a heating pad underneath. That way they can get the belly heat that they need in order to digest their food, and then they can still get that heat while feeling nice, safe, and secure within their hide. So another thing to keep in mind is that they will need another hide within their enclosure that does not have a heating mat at the bottom, and that is called the cool hide. So that way the snake can thermoregulate and go to whichever hide it wants to in order to cool down or stay warm, whichever they may need at that time. So that's very important to keep in mind. Another thing that is very important for ball pythons is a water source. So they should have a water bowl that is big enough for them to fully submerge in, but you don't want it to be too deep either because you don't want your snake to accidentally drown in it. So you do want to make sure that it is a nice soaking area for them, because that can help with their shedding process. And they also just need fresh water to drink from every now and then to rehydrate themselves. And while you're going to be using the water, you want to make sure that the water that you are using is dechlorinated water. What I use is Repti Safe. I just put a couple of drops into my tap water, and that removes any of the chlorine, and it makes it perfectly safe for your reptile to drink that water. Other than that, I like to just add foliage and some climbing places. It is a ball python, so most people are just thinking it's going to be inactive and not really moving around. However, my ball python really loves to move around and is quite adventurous for a ball python. So I like to make sure that there is some form of exercise going on, and that when he comes out at nighttime, he has some things to climb on and different things to feel around for, because it's very important when you have snakes to make sure that they have different feels and smells and things going on in their enclosure, just to keep them interested and not just bored to death in a tank. And that's pretty much it when it comes to setting up the enclosure. And I actually have a video on how I set up Chaos's enclosure, so I will put the link in the description below in case any of you guys are interested in seeing how I set up Chaos's enclosure. So the next thing that I would like to talk about that I think is the most important with ball pythons is their behavior. And the fact that their behavior is what makes me basically recommend them to more advanced keepers of snakes and reptiles. If you are completely new to snakes, I would never recommend to get a ball python. And that is simply because ball pythons are known to go off of feedings, and there's just a lot of problems when it comes to feeding ball pythons. Not all of them have issues, but it is very, very common for ball pythons to have issues with eating. So because of that, I just would not recommend them to someone that is new with taking care of snakes, because it can be very stressful and it's definitely something that's harder to deal with. And I think that there's just better options for beginners. So what I recommend for beginners is actually corn snakes, king snakes, and sand boas, because they're great eaters and their care is very, very easy. They also are just more, I think, comfortable. If anything, they're flighty and less likely to bite, whereas a ball python, especially a hatchling, does have that tendency to be a little bit nippy because they're just so shy. So when it comes to feeding ball pythons, you want to feed them something that is as thick as their girth, and that's very important because ball pythons are very thick snakes, so you want to make sure that you're giving them an appropriate sized meal that is big enough to fill them up, especially if you have hatchlings, because they need that food in order to grow. Something that is very important though is that if you are getting a hatchling ball python, depending on where it's coming from, there's a good chance that you're going to have to feed it live, because baby ball pythons, in order to get them going, they need live rodents because they aren't going to want to eat anything else. And that happens to be my issue that I am having right now with this little noodle over here. So he is still eating live. I'm trying to switch him over, but he's very, very stubborn. And what happens is basically when these snakes are babies, they're relying on instinct, and their instinct is to hunt. So he wants to see a mouse moving around and he wants to hunt it. He doesn't want something that is not moving. So it's just a learning process. There are ways to avoid that if you want a snake that already is switched over to frozen thawed. And make sure that when you're buying a snake, if you know the breeder, if you're at a reptile show or something, you can ask them. If they're already switched over, then that's a great sign that you'll have no issues. However, because ball pythons are so problematic with eating, by the time that you bring it home, it may need an adjusting period. You should always just let a snake adjust for the first week before trying to feed them, and you should not handle them until after they have finally eaten their first meal. So just all things to keep in mind. And again, sometimes ball pythons will just go off of feedings, and sometimes you may have to resort to feeding them live again in the future just to get them going. So these are all things to keep in mind that a lot of beginners may not want to do, and you're going to have to if it's your snake, because it's your responsibility, and it's just what makes the care for them a little bit more problematic and difficult to deal with. For people that are aware of that and comfortable with snakes and don't have any issues with dealing with these issues, then good for you. You can go ahead and get a ball python, and I would not have any issue with you getting one. I just don't want people to end up getting a ball python, having issues with them not eating, not taking care of them properly, and then just letting the animal starve, not taking it to a vet, or initially just getting rid of the animal altogether. So that's just something that I would like to avoid, and that's why I don't recommend ball pythons to beginners. Not to say if you are a beginner you can't get a ball python, because if you have the knowledge, if you've done the research, if you're comfortable with snakes, then I think that they would be a great addition to your family. So they can definitely be for beginners, but not for all beginners, if that makes any sense. But with all of that said, ball pythons are honestly, I can see why people are so obsessed with these guys. They are gorgeous snakes. They come in so many, like literally thousands of morphs, which are the different colors and patterns. And I can see why they get so addicting, because now I honestly want more, but I don't really have the space, so I'm really happy with Chaos now. But I'm really happy that I actually have him now, and I've come around to ball pythons because I've seen how great they are, and they aren't all just nippy and timid, because as you can see, like, he's just wandering around, he's nice, he's chill, and I couldn't be happier with him. Something else that I forgot to add was their humidity level. So this is another thing that maybe might be a little bit difficult for beginners. They do require a little bit higher of a humidity compared to other snakes. You want to make sure that they get a 60% humidity level, and I achieve this by misting his enclosure down every single night, and that way when he comes out it's nice and humid for him, and it really helps with their shed. You want to be looking for a full shed with these guys because they do have that higher humidity, which really helps them get that shed off. So just make sure that you're doing that. And that is pretty much everything when it comes to caring for a ball python. So just make sure that you do your research. If you're here watching this video, that is a great start. I encourage you to do even more research for yourself, and just make sure that you're making the right decision before getting any animal. So what are you doing, Chaos? So that completes my video for today. I hope that you guys enjoyed finally seeing Chaos. He's getting adjusted really great here. He's been eating and growing and adventuring, and I'm really loving having him. He's an amazing snake, and I hope that you guys like him. So thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry that I'm still sick and I sound horrible in this video, but one day I'll be better. One day. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.